Are we about to see a CPI short squeeze? Because the signals that I'm seeing in front of me are adding up to, hey, people might be a little over leveraged to the downside. And if we get a good CPI reading, we could really see some upside. So we're going to go into some charts today. I don't have a ton of time, so I'm trying to just tackle some things. Bear with me for a moment, but we will go through some other charts, such as Nvidia and things like that, because that is starting to tick up. A lot of the semiconductors starting to tick up in those areas. But for now, we just want to pay attention to the SPY that's right in front of us right here. We do have some new daily expected moves. We do see to the upside, we do have 548.45 to the upside, and we do have 535.63 to the downside. Now, key thing here, a lot of the times people do watch my live videos and they say, you know, how do we catch those rigged moves? And in this area was a good example of where we're at kind of right now. We see some basing out, some try for a bounce. And in this area, we were talking about how the dollar was higher while the SPY was going higher at the same time. And in this area, we had a very low put to call ratio, meaning people were really thinking that we were going to head higher from this area. They were very dramatically wrong. Okay, they were very dramatically wrong. And so in this area now, we saw that the put level came up, and that's why we said we most likely will head up from that area with that higher low. So the things we need to pay attention to going into CPI is, what is it looking like at this moment? And we know CPI can throw this for a loop. So the fact that we are seeing these short squeeze signals and some of them confirming on some charts, we need to talk about it. Are we seeing the same signals here that we're seeing here in order for some kind of drop to happen? So that would mean from back here, we had a low put to call ratio, people really going to the call side, and we had a high dollar while the market is also going higher. So let's pay attention to that right now. Let's just briefly look over at, well, let's start with the put to call ratio. And what are we looking at in this area? We're probably going to have to put this on like a line chart or something like that, but you'll just notice that we've actually been seeing high readings. People are trying to short the move on the way up, and that is something that happens a lot during a short squeeze. So the fact that this has remained higher, we can see that this is completely different than in the past where it was lower while we were making those highs, while people were getting overzealous to the call side. Right now, people are really banking on shorting at the highs, and that is something that can fuel the fire. Now, we do have CPI that comes out, so we have to take that with a grain of salt. If CPI throws it for a loop, we're going to talk about that next. But for now, is the dollar showing us? Is the dollar higher while the market is higher? Well, the answer to that is no. The market is actually heading up and the dollar is heading down. That is the correct correlation. People are moving out of cash and going into stocks. So this is completely different, and I'm not seeing the rigged behavior that says anything. I'm actually seeing more behavior that would lean closer towards some kind of short squeeze, and I wanted to be honest about that. Now, since we have CPI, if we didn't have CPI, I'd be very confident in saying like, hey, the price of this is going to go up. But because we have that CPI coming out, we have to be aware of a rock in our stream. We trade like water on this channel for a reason, and something we need to pay attention to is if this 2 hour is able to cross. If this 2 hour is able to cross, we could see something dramatic to the downside, because you notice just two 2 hour bars that take you below this area here would take you outside of that daily expected move, and we actually could see something crazy to the downside. But if that heads to the upside, we'll have to pay attention to the position of this up here. Are we seeing the dollar move up at the same time? Are we going to experience a pullback? You guys remember, at these lows down here, we said the most likely area to test, breakdown area. We're testing that right now. If we go higher, then the next area would be exactly where this point right here is, between the weekly and the daily expected move. Sorry, someone's mowing outside. But the daily and the weekly expected move right in this area would make total sense to get to, and then form that structure to head higher. We've talked about this at the lows, and now it is coming to fruition. So we need to pay attention to how this is reacting. But I would not be surprised if daily momentum takes over. We may see a gap up if we get good news from the CPI. So good news from the CPI, you have a recipe for a short squeeze. Bad news from the CPI, we might need some consolidation, or this could reverse down. We are aware of both scenarios. The same thing is going on with the Qs. I just want to make sure you are getting the daily expected moves for tomorrow. We have 470.95, a big range for tomorrow. Some pretty good implied volatility for tomorrow, and 454.21 to the downside. So we do have that good range in here. We ended outside of that today, so we're paying attention as we are at that breakdown area. We're starting to get above it. So if we're going to see some bullishness come in, we would target most likely, hey, this little area in between the weekly and the daily. Maybe we go tag a daily expected move, and then we pull back to create the structure that we were talking about down in this area, creating that right shoulder. Everything that we've talked about last week is starting to add up here. We talked about this potentially being some kind of higher low, and that's where we paid attention. We were in some moves very early, one of those being Nvidia, which, by the way, just to reiterate, if we get bad news from CPI, you need to pay attention to if this is crossing over. We will be live tomorrow morning to point this out to you guys. Now, Nvidia was a great trade setup on the 2-hour. We're going to switch this to a daily, but this is exactly what we were talking about. We were talking about a reaction to the bottom of our zone that then gives us that right shoulder. And look how it's positioned right now. If we got bad news from the CPI, hey, we could see that downward pressure and see that curl back up, creating some good head and shoulders in here for Nvidia. But there's one thing that's telling me, hey, this could head to the upside. We'll talk about that in a second on the daily chart. So what was the good setup here? And this is what we will learn in the course, right? If you take the course down, there's description, the technical indicators course, how to trade in any market for $100. It's 90% off. August is halfway done. You only got a few more weeks to get that. So it is $100 right now. You can learn how to take these trade setups. That way you're in the move early. So I'm in this move very early down here. I can take profit at this area and leave a couple of runners and already make money off of my trade and play pretty much with house money. I have no risk holding a couple contracts at this level. Yes, I did sell all but a couple contracts. That way, if the squeeze does happen, hey, I benefit from that. If we pull back, I can manage my trade and then reapply my profits in this area to the position later on. That's how I'm looking at Nvidia. That is how I'm mitigating my risk here. And I also have a very small hedge just in case we see some downside to help me out. So that is how we did it. This stuff you can learn in the course. It is down there in the description. It's 90% off. Now, the big signal I want you to pay attention to here, though, is the daily has crossed up on the MACD. This is telling you, Nvidia is saying, I have the daily price action above the 20 now, even better than getting just above the 9. I'm crossed up, the lagging indicator given it, and the RSI is crossing above that center line. This is all swing trading. That's down in the description too. If you just want to learn how to simply swing trade, it's a very, very good strategy. It's how I started out, and I think it's a great place for beginners to start out. But this is all the signals you want to see in order to head higher, and those things are confirming while the dollar drops off, while people are over positioned to the put side. The only rock we have in our stream is we have to pay attention to a 2-hour chart. We have to see, is CPI going to be bad news for the market? Is CPI going to pull us back? And then are we going to curl back up, creating that structure to actually head higher? That is what I am paying attention to tomorrow. Please join us tomorrow live. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications on so you see when we go live, because we do go live usually in the morning, and now we're doing it a lot in the around the closing hour. So make sure those you're subscribed with those notifications on. And then as we look forward, we can kind of click through some of these other charts. Okay, if you wanted to look just semiconductors in general, SMH, you see this. What has it done? It's curled up. It's giving the swing trade signals. The RSI is just right at the center line. That's the only thing you're really waiting on, but the MACD is crossed up. The price action is crossed up. So the only thing you have to watch out for is, the overall CPI that's coming out in the morning, which you're expecting. I would expect people want a lower number. PPI came down, so I would expect if a lower number prints, we might see some positivity, so we'll pay attention to that. Now, the last thing, as far as the entire important part of the video, and then we're just going to click through a few stocks, but the important part of the video here, we're going to actually touch on the VIX. I know this is a different setup than what we normally do, but hopefully you enjoy it. I just don't have a ton of time, so I want to go through it quickly. This is a big signal to pay attention to as well. Volatility was able to cross down on the RSI, on the MACD, and get below these two moving averages on the daily scale. So that is your first real signal that we could see some kind of short squeeze. Now, just a note here, if we did pull back tomorrow with that CPI, and then maybe this turns down later, well, that would make sense. We are down by more than 10%, so you do have an 85% chance for some kind of down day, some consolidative day in the SPY in the next 2 trading sessions. Keep that in mind. The other thing to think about with volatility, we could just see a few days worth of positivity, react down to that 200 and see some kind of pop. We'll be paying attention closely to volatility. We need to see how this develops. But if we start to close below that 200, good shot that you're going to continue squeezing. And I think if we close below the 200 and we don't see any bad news, you might end up going to making new all-time highs. I think that that's something you need to keep in your mind, while also thinking, hey, I need to manage my trades throughout this entire thing till we're out of the woods, because we get a lot of data throughout the next, I would say, 2 weeks. All right, paying attention to this, I just wanted to click through real quick and show you guys all these charts on the daily scale so we have a good picture in front of us. I know we're not going into the shorter time frames too much on this, but really it's just pay attention if those 2 hours start to cross down. If these dailies continue to cross up, watch out for upside, because you're seeing Apple give you what? Well, two swing trade signals. RSI above the center line. We have Apple above all of the moving averages. Just waiting on that MACD to cross. Some good news from the CPI. Boom. That thing actually could be at all-time highs by like next week. So we'll pay attention to it. But that is what I'm seeing in front of me at this moment. Tesla, this one's lagging behind a little bit, but you see the RSI and the MACD winding up, ready to make that move. We saw some good structure down here. This is a trade that I'm in at this moment, and we're heading up into a key area here. I think once we break above 215, that would be a good sign, but this MACD crosses up, RSI gets above the center line, the price action's already above the 200 and the 9, so you have swing trade signals forming here, and a lot of them are confirming on a lot of charts. Amazon, this one's been beat up a lot, so this one is probably the weakest looking one out of all of them, but it has pretty much V-shaped since then, and we can see if that creates some bullishness. Now you want to pay attention to the breakdown areas a lot of the time with a lot of these charts, see if they're able to take that back. That can tell you with this if there's going to be continued positivity. Nvidia, we already went over. That thing crossed. AMD crossed, right? AMD crossed, closing at the high of the bar. You have two swing trade signals. This is kind of crazy too because the lagging indicator, the MACD, crossed before the RSI. That's kind of crazy there, but this tells you, hey, we're not out of the woods yet. We're still below the 200, but this is a swing trade signal to pay attention to. If you're below the 200, you just want to watch out for that 200. It could hold as some resistance, so we'll pay attention to those CPIs numbers in the morning. Meta, this thing curled up a while ago. The actual swing trade signal to take the trade based on my strategies right there. This one right here. You have all three signals at the same time right here. Positivity comes. This is a dramatically upside move, so pay attention for right now because I believe you might even be running into a monthly expected move soon. So watch out for Meta. That one's already seen the big move and it's already in a continued positive trend. It is not overbought, so that can continue. But if those 2 hours roll over with CPI, pay attention, manage risk. Last ones to talk about here, Netflix. Netflix crossed up a few days ago. Look at that positivity coming in, and we're above the RSI. We're above most of the price action, just the 50 to take back. And this is looking like an uptrend so far. So pay attention to right now. Now, something crazy that did happen since you made it to the end of the video. AMC actually did cross and close above the 200 for the first time. What? When's the last time this thing crossed above the 200? Like, and closed above it? Maybe back here in July of 2023. Okay, so at this moment, now it wasn't the best crossing up above that moving average, but you do see, and this did not have a wick actually. This is kind of weird because we were watching this live and this did not have a wick here at the close, so that's interesting. But you're seeing this close just barely above that 200 at this moment. So that's something that's very different this time. What you want to pay attention to though is that confirmation on the MACD. If we're not going to see craziness, then this MACD is not going to cross. So you need this MACD to cross to confirm that upside. RSI did tilt up at the end of the day, so that's a good sign. You do have a swing trade signal here. You're kind of taking back the 200. You're taking back the 9. And then you have the RSI above the center line, so you're crossing up. The only thing you're waiting on is the lagging indicator, so I'd pay attention to that. But AMC doing something cool. Need to get above 556 to see that positivity. GME seeing a similar thing, wanting to cross up on the MACD. It's already got the price action, but the only thing that's bad for GME is it doesn't have that curl up of the RSI. It doesn't have the curl up of the MACD. So we're still paying attention for this to actually confirm up, but it is cool to see AMC actually take back that 200, even though it's just a very, very small win. You can see positivity off those. We'll pay attention to that tomorrow. Maybe, just maybe, I'm going to get a squeeze for my birthday and for my anniversary. We'll see. Yeah, just some things to pay attention to, though. And then just the last thing I would say is see if Bitcoin's able to curl up as well. I'll pay attention to this tonight. Maybe it is waiting on the CPI for people to really make a decision here as well. 4 hour was able to cross up at this moment. We'll see how that bar prints. We'll look at this in the morning. But overall, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure we're trading like water. Make sure we're paying attention if these signals confirm to the upside. We could be in the midst of a big squeeze, and one thing with a squeeze is it's very hard to short in that squeeze. It's very hard to find the top, so just be careful until you see actual reversal signals. I would even say outside of weekly expected moves. So thank you guys so much for watching today. I really do appreciate it. We're going to continue to trade like water. We will follow these signals closely, not get over leveraged in one direction, make sure that we're managing our trades, and we will be just fine. So thank you for watching. Have a great night. See you in the morning. Peace.